From inside the visitor radio booth here at M&T Bank Stadium, it is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer after the Ravens take out the Texans 34-10 in the AFC divisional round to book their ticket to the AFC Championship Game. We are going to break down the remarkable second half that the Ravens had, what adjustments they made at halftime. Lamar Jackson, a 4-touchdown game for him. We'll have Jonas's word of the day. We'll have our bird's eye view, all of that coming up and more. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsors.
If you have an appetite for saving money, then you should get the Rofo Rewards app from Royal Farms. Use the Rofo Rewards app to place mobile orders for pickup or delivery and earn royalty points to redeem for free stuff. And right now, new Rofo Rewards members will get a free any-size coffee for signing up. You can download the Rofo Rewards app at the Apple App Store or Google Play today. You'll find it's a very appealing app to have. Real fresh, real fast. Royal Farms.
The CIAA Men's and Women's Basketball Tournament is February 26th through March 3rd at CFG Bank Arena. Baltimore is bringing the hoops, the culture, and the energy. So grab your tickets now and book your hotel at baltimore.org/CIAA.
All right, Jonas, your word of the day is really more of a phrase of the day. What is it?
It's an invocation of the great legendary Raven, Ray Lewis. I think the Ravens were in following Lamar Jackson's role, his lead tonight. They were pissed off for greatness. This was a halftime scene that I think a little atypical for Lamar. He's not usually the one to wear his emotions on his sleeves as, apparently as he did tonight,
sure,
as nakedly as he did tonight. But
especially in the cold.
Yeah, he told us that there was some cussing. He told us that there was some naughty language. He's a God-fearing Christian man. He doesn't like to drop bombs that could be blurted out. I know you are master at expletives after the Mike McDonald video that you just put out.
Yeah, come on, redacted.
But as Nelson Aguilar told us after this game, this is a team that follows Lamar's lead in a lot of ways. He doesn't just talk. He says, and then he executes. He says, and then he executes. And this was an admittedly worrisome first half. I think in a lot of ways, this was exactly how you would draw it up if you were Houston. You blitz them, you introduce that volatility. The run game is not on track. And, I think every single person in this stadium, aside from maybe Lamar, was starting to get some flashbacks to 2019 and more recent games, more recent high leverage games where the Ravens and Lamar just seemed to be figured out and could never get back on track. But this was a masterclass of a second half. He did everything right, running the ball, passing the ball, turning passes into runs. The offensive line stepped up, wide receiver stepped up, the play calling stepped up. It was, like I wrote in our instant analysis, this was a team that looked nothing like a Super Bowl contender until the second half arrived, and they looked absolutely like the best team in football.
Yeah, this was a 10-10 game at halftime. And then the Ravens outscored the Texans 24-0 after the break. And Jonas, there were a couple possessions right before halftime where the Ravens offense was beginning to stall out. Lamar Jackson was facing a lot of pressure. He was getting sacked. And obviously the fans here at M&T Bank Stadium go quiet when the team is on offense, but it just felt like there was a collective feeling of unease in this stadium because fans had seen this before, and we'd seen the kind of duds that they have the capability of putting out there during the postseason. And that's where it seemed like it was headed. And then after halftime, this was a completely different Ravens team. This was the Ravens team that we saw blow out the Seahawks and the Lions here, that we saw beat the Bengals here in a big primetime game. That was the Ravens team that we were used to seeing. And like you said, it starts with Lamar Jackson. I mean, 4 touchdowns in this game. He had 52, I believe, passing yards at halftime. He had been sacked 3 times before the break. He finishes with over 150 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, 100 rushing yards. His legs are the ultimate get out of jail free card. And you saw him rely more on his legs. You saw play caller Todd Monken call up more designed runs for Lamar Jackson to get himself into open space. This team does not have a true number one wide receiver. They may not even have a true number one running back. And yet Lamar Jackson is willing this team to victory week in and week out. And now he has done it in the playoffs. And I think Lamar has probably gotten an unfair amount of criticism for the kind of playoff losses that this team has suffered over the last several years. But by the same token, he deserves an immense amount of credit for this win. Wins aren't a quarterback stat, but this win was so well earned by Lamar.
Yeah, he needed it. And he was asked at the end of his post-game presser today, whether he'd heard or read about all of the criticism and doubt about whether, he was a guy who was not built for the playoffs. And he showed everyone that he was built for the playoffs. And, it is a team effort. He would be the first to tell you that. But I think the most glaring example of him finding a way to make stuff happen in a way that he couldn't in that first half, it was against the blitz. It was the Texans were creative. They were decisive. They were effective sending guys after him in that first half, especially when, the Ravens managed just like a 1 yard carry or a 2 yard carry on first down. It was interesting to see the Ravens run the ball more in early downs than they had. And that set up some situations for Lamar where he just didn't find anyone open or didn't want to get rid of the ball, or he thought he could be maybe a little bit too cute with, holding on to it and trying to make stuff happen. But for as much as it went wrong in the first half, and it was not pretty, 5 for 9 for 41 yards, 3 sacks taken against the blitz, according to True Media, just completely flipped it on its head in the second half. He goes 7 for 8, 64 yards, and seemed like it figured it out. And I think a lot of people on Twitter were right in saying, oh, this is the kind of performance that every single, whether it's the Bills or the Chiefs, if the Ravens win, are going to replicate next week if they come to Baltimore and they have to stop Lamar. But
right.
We've seen that volatility on a game-to-game basis. We saw it on a half-to-half basis tonight. It was, why would you blitz this guy in the second half after a first half where it was like, why wouldn't you blitz this guy?
Right. Yeah, he totally flipped the script. And on a macro level, you talked about him needing this win. I mean, for his narrative, for his legacy, I know he's still, only 27 years old. He's got a lot of football ahead of him. But at this point in his career, this just felt like a fork in the road, where if he loses this game, you could see a scenario where people are talking about him unfairly, probably the way that they talk about a quarterback like Dak Prescott, who can't seem to get over the hump and get it done. And at this point in his career, he needed more signature playoff wins than what he has produced so far. And he needed to propel his team to the AFC Championship game.
I think I wouldn't say needed a signature win. I think he just needed to avoid a signature loss. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was messing around with some historical playoff odds, and only one quarterback, and the quarterback who is responsible for this will blow your mind. Only one quarterback as a 9-point favorite or better has lost twice since 2000
in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Who was that?
Peyton Manning. and it makes sense because you remember when Lamar was going through it early in his career, everyone was saying, well, it took Peyton Manning a while to figure it out. One of the teams that we kind of keep stumbling back on as one of these great, comparisons for this Ravens team, just in terms of how dominant it was during the season, was the 2005 Colts, who I think went like 14-2, trailed for all of like 2 or 3 hours of game time, a lot like these Ravens.
Right.
And they were 1 and done in the divisional round. They lost by, 3 points to some, AFC team, and they were a 9 or 10 point favorite in that one. 2 years later, 2007, another great Colts team, 9-point favorites. They lose again. It would have, Lamar would have been in great company with Peyton Manning, but you cannot afford with a team this good to have suffered another loss like that.
Yeah.
And, credit to Lamar and to the Ravens and Todd Monken and everyone on that team for turning this into a no-doubter that we can't even really nitpick because of just how comprehensive it ended up being.
The fact that it ended up being so dominant in the second half. And I said last week when we were previewing this game, I said, we're not going to get another blowout like we did in week 1, 25-9, when these two teams met. Guess what? It was an even bigger margin of victory, 34-10 for the Ravens. And it ended up being a laugher by the end of it because of the way that they were able to put their foot on the gas. I do think, we were talking also last week about the number of phenomenal coaches and the number of possible future head coaches on these two sidelines. Bobby Slowick, offensive coordinator for the Texans, could be a head coach in about a week, could be a head coach in a couple days.
He's doing interviews tomorrow.
Right.
If I were a Texans fan, I would be gnashing my teeth a little bit about a guy with the game of his life coming up, scheduling as many interviews for a week like this.
Yeah, a little Jonathan Gannon-esque. Then you have Todd Monken and Anthony Weaver and Mike McDonald all getting head coaching interviews on the Ravens sideline. So that's just an incredible amount of assistant coach talent, in addition to the fact that you have one of the best seasoned coaches in the NFL in John Harbaugh, and maybe the coach of the year on the other sideline in DeMeco Ryans. And I give them a lot of credit for the game plan that they scripted, because like you said, to start this game, the Ravens offense struggled mightily. And a lot of that was DeMeco Ryans, the blitzes that he was using to overwhelm the Ravens offensive line. They were blowing past Kevin Zeitler a lot. They were blowing past John Simpson a lot, and they were getting home. And then I do think, whether it was an experience factor, whether it was just we've been here before factor, a better coach factor, but I do think the adjustments that the Ravens coaches made at halftime, in addition to the fiery speech that Lamar Jackson gave, was the difference. They made the necessary adjustments. They scored touchdowns on 3 straight drives.
And on long drives, too.
Yeah, back-to-back drives that were 7 minutes in length. And for a team that, yes, they lead the league in rushing yards this season, but a lot of that has been Lamar Jackson. He ripped off a couple nice runs, and what he does with his legs continues to go underrated. Over 800 rushing yards this season, led all quarterbacks. But the running backs did a better job, I do think, in the second half, because Gus Edwards, Justice Hill were struggling a little bit in the first half, averaging 4 yards per carry. And then the second half, there was a much more concerted effort to get those two going. Even Dalvin Cook was getting his runs. And
it looks Gus got nicked up a little bit. And,
okay.
John Harbaugh saying that he's okay. But
gotcha.
At this point, everyone's okay unless their season is definitely over.
This is true, yeah. Dalvin Cook getting into the action a little bit, ripping off a 19-yard run in the second half. They made the necessary adjustments. A lot of it goes to coaching. Lamar obviously should get a vast amount of praise for that too. But the players and the coaches just seem to settle down and fix things after halftime.
Yeah, to your point about the running game, Lamar is and probably will be the best runner on every field that he takes, unless they see the 49ers again, and it's Christian McCaffrey. You look at the next-gen stat stuff, 42 rushing yards over expectation tonight.
That's ridiculous.
That's incredible. So he was expected to get 58. He got, 110? What was it?
I think he finished with 100 rushing yards, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Justice Hill, 23 yards over expectation. Gus Bus, -3. Dalvin Cook, -8. I'm not going to say a whole lot about Dalvin Cook because he had a nice game, but this is kind of who he is at this point. He doesn't do
19-yard run, Jonas.
Yeah, I know. But it was interesting to see the Ravens just kind of spam that outside zone play in the second half over and over again, just running that same little thing down right there, opening that cutback lane, could bounce it, could take it inside. And I thought that the Ravens, this game in a lot of ways reminded me of the game against the Jaguars, because the Jaguars came into that game vulnerable to the play action, stout against the run. And we thought that we'd see Lamar, take apart that defense with run fakes, find guys to open downfield, but that the run game would really have some tough sledding. And the exact same profile as this Texans team. The safeties aren't great, linebackers aren't great in coverage, but the Ravens really did not have a whole lot of success, a whole lot of joy in the play action passing game. But Lordy, did they run it up in the run game? Not just the design runs, but the scrambles as well. And if they can do what they did against Houston, which number 2 run defense in DVOA, I believe, you've got to feel great if you're talking about what this team can do against the Chiefs, who are like bottom 6 in DVOA, the Bills are a little bit tougher, but they've had some, losses at linebacker or whatever. So I'm feeling great if I'm Todd Monken.
And what changed things? What was the catalyst for an offensive turnaround in that Jaguars game? Was that Lamar scramble and throw up that jump ball to Isaiah Likely, and that touchdown to Isaiah Likely in the end zone, where Isaiah said after the game that, he was telling Lamar, just throw it up for me and I will go get it. And his jump ball ability, I mean, assuming Mark Andrews comes back next week, which, is not a given, there's not 100% chance, but it's sounding like it's trending like he's coming back for the AFC Championship game. Isaiah Likely still deserves to be a big piece of this offense because he has consistently been just a jump ball artist for this offense and kind of a get out of jail free card like Lamar's legs have been.
And a yak guy too. I mean,
right.
If you're going to get blitzed and you're going to put Isaiah Likely in man coverage or in a zone that is not particularly well attended to by defenses, then he's just going to put a hand in your face and, say, enjoy the ride, bud. I mean, we saw that, I think, on his first catch, early. Yeah. I think it was on that first drive that really got the Ravens going after halftime. And, only 2 catches for 34 yards and a touchdown, but it is the efficiency that stands out the most. I think this is probably a little bit dated, but I remember looking after, I think the Miami game, or maybe during the Miami game, his EPA per target was something like 0.7, which is like 2019 Lamar times 2. So if you could basically reproduce a typical Lamar Jackson play during that MVP season and say double it.
Right.
And obviously EPA per target is a little bit wonky because it's not accounting for all the plays that you don't get targeted. Mm-hmm. And it certainly helps to have a lot more volume and be that efficient, but he's been on a per target basis, by far the NFL's best tight end, basically since Mark Andrews went out.
Yeah. And this is a necessary development for this offense that still doesn't really have a number one wide receiver. I mean, Zay Flowers led the way for the Ravens, 4 catches for 41 yards, but he is not the typical wide receiver 1 in an offense. Rashad Bateman right in the Rashad Bateman zone, 3 catches for 39 yards. OBJ, just that 1 catch for 12 yards in the first half. This is an offense that is, we've seen it all season long. Lamar is going to feed a lot of different mouths. Nobody is going to go for 150 yards in a game, and he's just going to have to rely on piecemealing together a strong, passing offense.
Just 1 catch for Odell, but he did give Lamar a top 10 chain. Did you see that?
Yeah, the Sports Center top 10 chain. What is that a reference to?
I don't know, because if you're going to give the MVP a chain and it has a number on it off the top,
right?
Wouldn't you specify? I don't know. Maybe Odell got it 8 years ago for the one-handed catch. And he was like, "This is now yours, my son."
Is this something that ESPN gives out, or do you think he ordered this?
I personally have never been on SportsCenter top 10, so I can't speak for that.
No, you have been in Sports Illustrated.
That's true.
That was a cute picture that you tweeted out at Jonas_Shaffer. I'm at Paul Mancano, by the way. Follow us and subscribe to the Baltimore Banner, $1 for 6 months. Thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to switch over to the defense now, Jonas. Let's talk about what changes the defense made after halftime in this as well. Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen leading the way for the Ravens in terms of tackling. This is a Ravens defense that was once again without star cornerback Marlon Humphrey. And just throughout the week, it was the lack of updates for Humphrey were getting more and more depressing. And the beginning of the week, we thought for sure Humphrey would be out there. Not by the end of the week. However, this Ravens defense has had to play from that position a lot. They've had to play without Marlon Humphrey a lot. He ended up playing 10 games this season and not the entirety of those 10 games. So you were relying on Brandon Stevens and Ronald Darby for the most part to lock up Nico Collins, who is the leading receiver for the Texans. I know the Texans were without Tank Dell.
And Noah Brown.
I always forget that. You always remind me that Noah Brown was out for this game. 4 years from now, you're going to be saying they didn't have Noah Brown. And I'll be saying, I did forget that. Those two probably would have helped a lot for CJ Stroud. But the Ravens defense really just tightened their grip after halftime.
Yeah, they did everything extremely impressively. I think maybe a more dangerous offense with better health converts some of those first half drives that got into Ravens territory into more points. believe it was 4 Houston drives that got past midfield or ended in midfield.
Mhm.
Texans just managed the 1 field goal, and that one was like a 50-yarder from Fairburn. They had to punt twice. They missed 1 field goal. Maybe if the Ravens go into halftime down 6-9 points, this is a different ending, but it wasn't. And the Ravens, for all the shortcomings that they have had at times over the course of the season, they have really bowed up in impressive ways, like in the spots where they need to, like their run defense tonight, excellent. But I just think big picture over the course of the season, they have not been good, like in between the 20s. But you get into the red zone, I think it was them and the Patriots that were like a step above every single other run defense in goal line run defense. And, we saw Broderick Washington have a great game as a run defender tonight. Justin Madubuike brought it as a pass rusher, but Texans just could not get anything going.
No.
I think looking at the stats post game, 40% of their runs went for negative or 0 yardage. And if you can't set yourself up for success on second down or on third down, you're going to be playing a long losing game. And, that the Ravens were able to do this against a bad rushing offense is good because, I think they needed proof of concept that what they were doing in the regular season could also carry over into the postseason.
Devin Singletary for Houston, 9 carries for just 22 yards. That's 2.4 per carry. Just 14 carries all told for the Texans today, 38 yards, 2.7. They managed 14 rushing yards, I believe, in the first half, and it just did not get – there was only really 1 breakaway run that I could think of that Devin Singletary had in that second half. We came into this game praising CJ Stroud and the rookie season that he had. Did not get sacked in this game. He is remarkably mobile in the pocket and aware of where his checkdowns are, where his receivers are downfield. I mean, he is far ahead of his years. And the Texans are in very good hands, I think you could say, between DeMeco Ryans and CJ Stroud. Also incredibly accurate. The first half in particular, he was putting the ball exactly where he needed to time and time again. But, and also doesn't turn the ball over. I mean, he's just incredible. The fact that he finished the season with 5 interceptions this year as a rookie and really didn't throw maybe he threw 1 or 2 dangerous passes in this game. So the Ravens made him earn his yardage today and, did a good job. 175 yards passing for CJ Stroud, 19 for 33. They put the clamp on him after halftime. I was a little bit worried coming into this game about the tight ends, Brevin Jordan and Dalton Schultz in particular, against the Ravens defense. We've seen a couple times this season, tight ends have gone off against this Ravens defense and eaten up in the middle of the field. Dalton Schultz had a very good first half, 3 catches, 30 yards. He also dropped a wide open, what would have been a first down. So he was getting separation. He was getting open. But the linebackers figured things out after halftime, in particular, Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen, and the pass rush was getting a little bit more pressure on CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I think we have to talk about the pass rush. That it was probably the most impressive stat from Next Gen Stats. The Ravens defense had 12 different pass rushers generate a pressure and averaged their 3rd quickest time to pressure of the season, 2.4 seconds. And that's like as quick as a typical Talia, as quick as a typical Tua.
You've been watching too much Maryland football.
2.4 seconds. That's ridiculous. And we should say, like, that's probably juiced a little bit by the classic Arthur Mollett slot blitz, where you have the typical Michael Pierce and Travis Jones, engaging the guys up the middle so that Mollett or whoever is coming off the slot gets the clean path to the quarterback. But no team has been able to figure it out. I think aside from like Matt Stafford just kind of throwing into the pressure in that game here, and like that was a perfect pass.
But still no sacks for this defense. You think that's just more CJ Stroud escaping the pocket?
I mean, you look at his average depth of target. This is a guy who, even though when he came to Baltimore had to settle for checkdowns, he's been a guy who's feasted on deep passes and big shots downfield. Today, 6.5 air yards per attempt, and that's remarkable considering just how often they were in 2nd and long and 3rd and long, and the fact that he was able to basically pass at like the level of a guy like 6.5 air yards per attempt is like last in the league type stuff. So the fact that the Ravens were able to put the ceiling on this passing offense and say, you can only throw here, then it kind of makes sense that, he didn't have the opportunity to do a whole lot of deep shots, or the Ravens didn't get him on the ground once because it didn't matter. They were telling him where to go with the ball, and he obliged.
In terms of a big picture now, Jonas, bird's eye view here. We have yet to determine, to know who the opponent will be in the AFC Championship game, but it will be either the Chiefs or the Bills. Of those two teams, based on what you've seen from them so far, Chiefs, obviously the defending Super Bowl champions. The Bills, we saw them go on that remarkable second half run, and then struggle a little bit against the Steelers, but eventually put them away. Do you have a preference for who the Ravens should face in this game, who they would fare better against?
I think if you're playing, if this were a situation where it's a 7-game series, which team would the Ravens take their chances with in a 7-game series? I think it would be the Bills. Bills are, I think, we're the stronger team over the course of the season in Kansas City. Obviously, they got the number 2 seed, but they would come into Baltimore just completely and totally divorced from the team that they were, especially on defense, 8 weeks ago, 12 weeks ago. I mean, Russell Douglas, not going to play. I think tomorrow night. Trey White, obviously their other starting quarterback, done for the year. Matt Milano is done. The linebacker who was filling in nicely for Matt Milano, not playing Sunday night, I would imagine would not be available. Gabe Davis, who's been so important as a run blocker, but also a deep threat, I think would be pretty unlikely for him to play. So you're talking about a team that would trust Josh Allen the way that the Ravens in the past had to trust Lamar Jackson. He would be the weapon. He would be the engine of that rushing attack. He would be the engine of that passing attack. And it's a passing attack that you're relying on tight ends. And I think you would feel pretty good with, Kyle Hamilton having to take on Dawson Knox or Dalton Kincaid.
Right.
And then just, it is a old and beaten up secondary pass defense. And that hasn't always mattered for the Ravens, that they've kind of squandered some opportunities to just take it to defenses that we think aren't that good or are vulnerable. But I think you want to avoid Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And especially, I think you want to avoid Steve Spagnuolo and that Chiefs defense. I mean, they were second in the NFL in sacks. They are a lot like Mike McDonald's defense in that they come at you from creative ways, get you to hold onto the ball a little bit longer than usual. Chris Jones could make life really, really difficult for Kevin Zeitler and John Simpson. L'Jarius Sneed, terrific outside cornerback. Trent McDuffie, terrific slot cornerback if he's the one who's matched up against Isaiah Likely or Mark Andrews. So I just think even though Buffalo had a better regular season, the state of their injuries and just the likelihood that they would get Josh Allen to make a couple dumb Josh Allen plays would be more enticing for the Ravens than if Kansas City were to come to Baltimore.
Just the sheer level of players left and teams left in the AFC. I mean, 4 of the best quarterbacks, I think you could say, in the AFC. Now, maybe the 3 best quarterbacks left in the AFC, maybe in the NFL, in Mahomes, Allen, and Jackson now. And the Ravens got a tough test today.
But one more day to get ready for them. That's the advantage of playing on Saturday. If they'd lost, their season would have been over before anyone else, and they wouldn't have been able to enjoy any of these, playoff games going on right now or tomorrow without it. But now they have another day to lick their wounds and to get ready for whoever it is that's coming up.
And both those teams are used to playing in the cold, and that game's going to be played tomorrow, Sunday at 6:30 in Buffalo. So an exciting game. And Jonas, this team has an extra day and a nice night to celebrate. Seemed like they were having a good time in the Ravens locker room. John Harbaugh was really getting down.
Do you think it would be a failure at this point if the Ravens don't make it to the Super Bowl?
I mean, that's tough. I feel like I have to fully digest this game and, see who their opponent is going to be in the next round. The fact that this AFC Championship game is going to be here is going to be
first time in franchise history.
That's awesome. And that's going to be a heck of a spectacle, I think, for fans and for everybody watching that game. Probably another frigid game next weekend. We don't know.
I think I saw a tweet that the weather forecast, the extended weather forecast, was a little warmer. than this one. Not that says a whole lot.
Yeah, but to answer your question, I mean, I think we said before the season that they had to get this far for the season to be really viewed as a success, at least one playoff win. It helped that they had the bye, so that kind of counts as a win. They push past and get to the AFC Championship game. And the expectations are different now. I mean, they're probably going to be favored against whoever they play in that game next weekend. The expectations are different, but at the same time, I think you do have to take a step back and appreciate that this season so far has been an overwhelming success. I mean, Lamar Jackson is the MVP, is going to be. Both of these coordinators are elevating the play of, the talent that they have in front of them. John Harbaugh continues to remind people that he is far from cooked and that he has a lot of good years left in the tank as a tactician and a leader, as a head coach. It has been an overwhelming success so far. And whatever happens from here on out, I mean, I think Ravens fans are just thrilled to be along for the ride because it's, you got the kind of agita and the kind of nervousness in the first half, but the way that they played in the second half is just a reminder of how this team has reminded fans that it's okay to smile. It's okay to relax. It's okay to have fun for a little bit because this team just feels like it is a much lighter group. It is a much happier group. It is a much more fun group than the one that we've seen, I think, in the last couple of years.
I guess my response to that would be kind of like, if not now, then when?
Right. And we said that about Lamar coming into this game too.
Yeah. And that is unfair because of you're putting undue pressure on one game to make up for the significance of the entire year. But I mean, you just look at the past 5 games now, including tonight, in games that matter against teams that we thought were good. They beat the Rams in overtime. Obviously, that was a weird one where the defense lost Marlon Humphrey, or not Marlon Humphrey. They just didn't play well.
Yeah.
37-31. Next week, Jaguars in Jacksonville, 23-7. Next week, in San Francisco, Christmas Day, 49ers, 33-19. Next week, Dolphins in Baltimore, 56-19. And now they put up a whooping on the Texans. And you're only as good as, what is the baseball phrase? You're only as good as your next day's starting pitcher.
Right.
And
momentum is your next day's starting pitcher. Yeah.
So the coaches on the other side of this AFC bracket are good enough to negate, we think, probably some of that momentum and take away what the Ravens do well and make them fight left-handed. But I just think whoever it is, the Ravens would probably have the advantage in offense, defense, special teams. Aside from maybe the Bills offense versus the Ravens offense, I think that would be kind of close. But in every other phase of the game, plus you throw in the home field advantage, plus you throw in the extra day of rest, plus you throw in Mark Andrews and probably Marlon Humphrey coming back, maybe Marlon Humphrey coming back. I just think, the Ravens would probably be 6-point favorites in that one.
Yeah. I mean, I was pretty surprised that the line was as large as it was today, 9.5, and they blew it out of the water. So they continue to exceed expectations. I mean, really only 3 times this season have they let us down. And
the funny thing is, like, the way that first half was setting up was so close.
Yes.
You talking about some like defensive hiccups, a special teams failure, and then Lamar getting coaxed into uncomfortable positions by the blitz. But here we are, Ravens a lot, the Texans a little. Yeah,
and to say, that this is a big win for Lamar's career, we touched on, on it off the top, but he is just too good a quarterback at this point in his career to be 1-4 in the playoffs. And it's great that he's not.
I'm very glad that I didn't have to see or tweet the inevitable. With this loss, Lamar Jackson drops to 1-5 in the playoffs.
Right.
It's worse than Dak Prescott as a starter. The worst in the modern NFL era or whatever. I'm glad that we didn't have to talk about that because that's just a very, very frustrating thing because it is so dissonant from the Lamar that we know in the regular season.
And he plays better. I mean, if you watch him, he is a better playoff quarterback than Dak Prescott, than some of the guys that just don't get it done in the playoffs. I mean, he is not a game manager. He is not to say Dak Prescott is a game manager per se, but Lamar elevates his team in a way that quarterbacks 5 through 15, 5 through 32 do not. That is why he is a top 5 quarterback, is because what he did today, because he elevated that offense that was getting nothing done in the first half to a new level by scoring those 4. He willed his team to victory in this game, and he is too good a quarterback for that to have continually happened throughout his career. And that's why I think another win next week would show that the first foray into the playoffs and his first 3, his first 4, 5 playoff games were the anomaly, and that the wins are going to be easier as they go on throughout his career. You can get used to more wins, playoff wins from Lamar.
Yeah. If it's the Chiefs coming to Baltimore, I will be overflowing with Taylor Swift puns and jokes. And if it's Buffalo, I guess you've got like Shailene Woodley jokes.
I guess.
Josh Allen's girlfriend.
Really?
I think so.
Didn't Shailene Woodley date Aaron Rodgers?
Is it Shailene Woodley? Oh, what's the
Shailene Woodley was
not Shailene Woodley. The other like brunette. I'll look it up.
I have no idea. You are the pop culture expert here on this podcast, Jonas. Wow. Can you imagine Taylor Swift coming to Bank Stadium?
Haley Steinfeld.
There we go. Yeah. I am already we got to come up with a comprehensive list of places that Taylor Swift has to go to in Baltimore. LP Steamers. She's got to get her crabs there.
Banner Newsroom. While we're doing a podcast.
Newsroom. Wow. What the guest of the century we are going to book. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning into the Banner Ravens podcast. At Jonas_Shaffer is his Twitter handle. I'm at Paul Mancano. And of course, please do subscribe to the Baltimore Banner, $1 for 6 months if you don't already. We will have 2 podcasts coming this week. I think we're thinking Monday and Thursday, but don't hold us to that. We will be going live on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, wherever we are doing it. Please give us a like, a thumbs up, a subscribe. If you write us a good review, we will read it out here on the podcast. For Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano. Thanks so much for tuning in. Ravens moving on to the AFC Championship Game.